Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everyone. Please join me in welcoming Gregory Dewerpe and Troy Harvey, please. Welcome to you both. I'm excited to talk a little bit more about this wonderful partnership that we have. And I'd love to start with you, Gregory. Tell us a little bit about your firm, your thesis, what you're seeing in the market, and then we'll move to talk a little bit about your investment into Troy's company.
Right. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Gregory. I'm founder and managing part of AO. AO is the largest venture capital firm in Europe focusing on PropTech, or the built environment, which is real estate and construction industries. So the idea is that real estate is the largest industry in the world. It's a 380 trillion industry, happens to be one of the least digitized industry globally, and is by far the most polluting industry in the world, accounting for 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. So at a time when we're all thinking about the climate crisis, I think the idea that we can impact 40% of the problem is very meaningful, because we're running out of time. And so what the world needs is not another meatless burger or an alternative to plastic straws. It needs to invest capital where it's actually going to move the needle. And so that's exactly what we do. We invest in early stage, let's say late seed to Series B, companies that are transforming the industry, digitizing it, automating it, decarbonizing it, and creating climate resiliency.
Amazing. And I mean, as somebody who's spent quite a while in PropTech, it was actually a very surprising fact that you shared related to 40% of carbon emissions coming from this industry. Is that something that's typically surprising for people?
It's less and less surprising, but I can tell you that maybe 3-4 years ago when I was pitching LPs, they were like, I'm pretty sure your stat is wrong. And now it's fortunately been accepted. And I think if you double click on the number, 40%, you can divide it into two buckets. So 1/3 of that 40% is embodied carbon. So everything that goes into the process of construction, think of materials, think of the actual process of building. And by the way, I think a huge amount of global wastage is in construction and demolition. So it's also very inefficient in these processes. And then 2/3 of this 40% emission is operational carbon. So think of the lights, the HVAC, the heating, the cooling that you find in any building or structure on planet Earth is vastly, vastly inefficient. And so that's typically the type of things that we tackle.
Amazing. Troy, tell us a little bit about PassiveLogic, and then I think it'll make a fantastic sense for the audience on why AO has invested.
Sure. I mean, we started with that same 40% number. And it turns out the Department of Energy's own numbers is 40% of that is just being wasted because we're not controlling the infrastructure that we have accurately enough. And so if you take those two numbers, 40% times 40%, that's the largest chunk of energy that is just like sitting there waiting for us to save and they end climate goals of that. So that's like not turning like gas cars to electric. It's like getting rid of all transportation, right? So that's where PassiveLogic started. And what we realized is that the infrastructure in buildings and the built environments and industrial systems, the technology and the automation, it's really, really old. Like the newest platform you can buy there is like 25 years old now. And it's using 100-year-old algorithms. So you've got the world's most complex robotic systems in buildings where you look at it by just IO count, meaning the sensors and controllables. And buildings are hitting 1 million IO in one large building now, where a Tesla is like 200, right? So what we saw is where companies like Tesla were focused around autonomy in vehicles, there was this huge opportunity in how do we make autonomous systems in everything else to save the energy and also make those applications easy to deploy. So PassiveLogic really focused on generative autonomy, and there's two parts to what we do. How do we build those generative autonomy systems? So you're familiar with generative AI, where you can ask questions, ChatGPT, and you get answers. But what if you could just draw the systems that you're interested in and generate custom autonomous systems in a matter of minutes, just like you can use ChatGPT? And then that requires a whole new AI infrastructure. The current tools that we use, things like Google's TensorFlow or Meta's PyTorch, they have two big problems. One, they're not fast enough to do all this edge compute that we want. And the other one is they're not actually generative, these tools we're using, they're interpolative. And what we need is composable AI, the ability to take bits and pieces of different AI sub-fragments and then create new kinds of AI. So that's the thing that's missing in AI today. AI is sort of famously monolithically trained, which is very successful on one hand, but on the other hand, violates every known principle of computer science where it's been a 70-year study of composability. So we build AI frameworks and new kind of compiler technologies to then power these generative autonomy systems.
And tell us a little bit about your background. Was this a company you always had in mind to build, or how did you get here?
It wasn't a company I had in mind to build. Originally, I came out of product development, and then somewhere about 15, 20 years ago, accidentally found myself in the building environment where we were doing physics-based simulation of buildings. And at the time, there was this big industry sort of emerging of people saying, how do we make high-performance buildings? And I found myself accidentally getting sucked into this industry where it just took over my previous business. I had architects, developers from around the world asking, how can I help them build better buildings? And then once we got into that space, we realized, oh man, buildings really need a lot of help. And it's not just that they're wasting all this energy, they are incredibly opaque. There are companies in the world, some of our investors besides AO are companies like Brookfield on the building side and NVIDIA on the AI and GPU side. And they were all looking around the same problem of like, hey, this is the biggest industry in the world. And buildings are black boxes, right? We have no idea what's going on inside them.
Amazing. Tell us, as a consumer, is there any way for a consumer to be able to have more knowledge, perhaps, about the energy usage and efficiency of either residential or commercial properties? I mean, how does that exist today? Do we think we'll see more of it?
So I think in this space, the way that people think of automation on the consumer side is this very soft side of like the audio and the visual systems, right? That stuff's being sort of mainstreamified, but this sort of secret life of buildings, like the underlying systems that actually make the functional pieces go. Today, what we're trying to do is make that more interactive and something that's tangible, right? So that you shouldn't be spammed by notifications that's not smart. When we think smart building, what we think is like I press a button on my phone, something occurs, and then maybe I get all these notifications, right? So that's really nothing different than remote control. Like when I was a kid, there was these late night TV commercials for the clapper, right? Most of what you're experiencing today is the clapper for your phone, right? So it's not actually smart. It's not, what smart would be, it's taking care of it for us, and we don't have to think about it.
Amazing. That I am looking forward to a future where we're no more clappers and truly seeing beneficial automation. Thank you so much to you both. We're really looking forward to seeing what you're going to do together and hopefully bringing that number down much lower. So thank you both very much. Yes?
Thank you.
Great.